All right, so we're diving into From Rags to Riches this time, specifically episode 4, City of Dreams.
Yeah.
And, on the surface, we've got this classic aspiring writer story, small town kid makes it big. Our main character is Alex.
Right.
But even though it's fiction, it really digs into some pretty universal truths, I think, about, what it takes to be creative, what ambition looks like, and honestly, maybe even forces us to look inward a bit.
Absolutely. And you know what really struck me right off the bat is how this episode throws Alex into a situation that's like so relatable for so many people, that whole fish out of water thing.
Really?
Alex wins this scholarship to a writing workshop.
Fancy, right?
Yeah, prestigious. Big city. And it is a huge contrast to their life back in Milltown.
Yeah, I mean, talk about sensory overload, right? The podcast really lays it on thick with the sounds of the city, the crowds, the energy. I mean, do you think that kind of environment can actually be good for creativity, or is it just too much?
Well, there's a whole bunch of research on this. And some studies show that being in an environment with just like a moderate level of stimulation,
It's at like a coffee shop.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like a coffee shop, or even just like walking down a busy street.
Uh-huh.
That can actually help boost creative thinking.
Interesting.
Like your brain gets this little jolt of energy, starts making new connections.
A little chaos is good, but like, what about when it goes too far? Like what Alex is dealing with.
Yeah, that's when it gets tricky. Too much stimulation can totally lead to like cognitive fatigue, right?
It makes sense.
And then it's hard to focus. It's like, imagine trying to write a symphony with a marching band playing right next to you.
Yeah. No, I get it. I get it. And for someone like Alex, I mean, coming from a small town, it's got to be even more intense.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's not even just the city itself. Once they get to this workshop, it's clear that it's not exactly the dream they had in mind.
Yeah.
Everyone else there seems like so ahead of the game. They've got the fancy equipment, the resumes, they just ooze confidence.
Yeah, and this part of the episode really hit me. It's like tapping into this universal experience, especially for creatives, right?
Yeah.
Imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
That feeling of not being good enough. Everyone else is more talented, more experienced. You're going to be found out as a fraud. Have you ever felt that way?
Oh, all the time. I think we've all been there, right? You walk into a room, everyone's talking about stuff you barely understand. You start questioning everything.
Totally. And it's even harder for creative people because their work is so personal.
Yeah.
So tied to like who they are.
For sure.
When you put your writing out there, your art, your ideas, and people can just critique it, that's making yourself vulnerable.
Absolutely.
And that can totally trigger all kinds of self-doubt.
No, for sure. But here's the thing that I thought was really interesting. Even with all this imposter syndrome going on, Alex has this amazing support system in their mom, Maria.
Right.
She's back in Milltown. But her words, like, they stay with Alex, almost like a mantra.
It's powerful.
It is.
It shows that it's not just about the external challenges, but also this inner battle with self-belief.
Uh-huh.
And coming back to Maria's words, I think that really shows how much external validation can affect how we see ourselves.
It makes you wonder, though, what if you don't have that kind of support? Or what if you start to depend on it too much? Could that actually hold you back from, like, believing in yourself?
That's a good question, and I think that gets to the core of what this episode is exploring.
Yeah.
It's not enough for people to just tell you you're talented.
Right.
You have to believe it yourself.
You got to own it.
You got to own it. You have to build that belief so that you can deal with challenges, with setbacks.
Which, let's face it, are going to happen.
They're part of the process.
Yeah, and I think that's where the real work begins. It's easy to doubt yourself when everyone around you seems to have it all figured out.
So true. It's this constant process of like silencing your inner critic.
Yeah.
Focusing on what you're good at, on the progress you're making.
Yeah, that's something everyone can relate to, I think. Writer, entrepreneur, or just someone trying to, navigate life.
Absolutely.
So we've got Alex battling self-doubt, adjusting to a new environment, and then boom, they get hit with this chance to present their work to, get this, a panel of publishers.
Talk about pressure.
High stakes.
High stakes.
And what I found really interesting is that the instructor tells them to write from the heart.
Right.
Tap into those authentic experiences. Let your true voice come through.
It's funny because that's something you hear so often from successful creatives.
Yeah.
That authenticity is key. But it's so much easier said than done.
Oh, yeah. Especially when you're feeling insecure and everyone else seems so polished and professional. How do you get the guts to be vulnerable like that, to share your real self?
$1 million question right there. And I think the episode starts to unpack that by showing how Alex's story is really rooted in their experiences back in Milltown.
So they're embracing those humble beginnings.
Yeah.
They're finding those universal truths in the small town details,
Mm.
and that's what helps them connect with a wider audience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It also shows that you don't need some glamorous or crazy background to create something meaningful.
It's the everyday stuff sometimes that's the most powerful.
Absolutely.
And then we get the entrance of Miss Harper, the big-time publisher who's famous for discovering new talent. She's like the gatekeeper, and Alex's story blows her away.
It's interesting how the episode kind of touches on luck, too.
Being in the right place at the right time.
Being in the right place at the right time, yeah.
Yeah.
But it also shows how being prepared can lead to those lucky breaks.
Right, so Alex has put in the work, honed their craft.
Exactly.
They're ready when opportunity knocks.
I love that. And it really highlights that even if Ms. Harper hadn't been there, just the act of sharing their work would have been a victory for Alex.
For sure. Being vulnerable, being authentic, that's huge.
Absolutely.
And that's where we leave off for now. Alex is on the verge of success, but it feels like the journey's just beginning.
Yeah. And it's something we're going to dig into more. Because getting what you want, that's often just the first step, right?
Right.
What happens after you get that book deal or that promotion? What new challenges pop up? That's something I think is worth considering for our listeners, too, in relation to their own goals. What happens after you reach that mountaintop? And it's a question I think a lot of people don't even think to ask themselves, right? We get so focused on that goal, reaching the top of the mountain, but then what? What about what comes after?
It's like you finally get there, you plant your flag, and suddenly you realize, whoa, there's a whole mountain range behind this one that I didn't even know was there.
Exactly. And for creative types, that can be a really scary thought. Because the things that got you there in the first place, that raw authenticity, that willingness to be vulnerable, it can start to feel like a liability when the stakes get higher.
Right, the pressure's on there, more eyes on. You got to keep delivering.
And that's where I think the way the episode uses the city as this kind of double-edged sword is really smart. It's full of opportunity, but it's also incredibly competitive, almost cutthroat.
It's like they say, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. But then again, a lot of people don't make it. And if you're not careful, that constant hustle can really wear you down.
Which brings us back to needing that strong internal compass, because when you're surrounded by all that external pressure, it's easy to lose sight of what really matters to you, what your values are as an artist.
So how does someone like Alex, or really anyone facing that kind of pressure, stay grounded amidst all the chaos? Any advice?
Well, one thing that jumps out at me is the power of ritual, even in the middle of the city's crazy energy. You see Alex looking for those quiet moments, a walk in the park, taking a few deep breaths before starting work. Those little rituals can be grounding.
I love that. It's like carving out a little piece of Milltown in the heart of the metropolis, your own little sanctuary.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It could be listening to a specific playlist while you work, having tea in the same spot every morning. Whatever helps you center yourself, just make it a regular practice.
Something I noticed about Alex is how they're open to feedback, but also really careful about who they listen to. They're clearly influenced by the workshop instructor, but they're also filtering that advice through their own lens.
That's so important for any artist to learn. Not all feedback is good feedback.
Right. Some people just want to mold you into what they think will sell.
Exactly. Others will actually encourage you to be yourself.
I think it was Ira Glass who said something like, you can't please everyone, so you might as well please yourself. And when you start to find success, it can be tempting to chase that feeling by trying to follow every trend and take every bit of advice that comes your way.
And that is a surefire way to burn out. I think it's about finding that sweet spot, being open to feedback, but also trusting your own instincts.
Because at the end of the day, the work that really connects is the work that comes from a place of genuine passion and honesty.
Couldn't agree more.
And speaking of passion, I think it's worth pointing out that the story Alex tells, the one that wins over Mrs. Harper, isn't some big epic adventure story. It's a story about perseverance and hope, and it's inspired by their life back in Milltown.
It's like a reminder that sometimes the most powerful stories come from the ordinary stuff, the everyday details we usually don't even notice.
Yeah.
It's about finding the extraordinary in the ordinary.
It makes you think about all the ways we try to polish our own stories, edit out the messy parts, the failures, the things that don't fit into the narrative we've created for ourselves.
What if we embrace those imperfections instead? What if those were the things that actually made our stories more relatable, more human, more likely to connect with other people?
That's such a great way to look at it. It's like saying, yeah, I messed up, I fell down, I got lost. But that's what makes my journey mine, and that's what makes me who I am.
And it's in those moments of vulnerability when we let go of trying to be perfect that the real magic happens.
So we've talked about ritual, about being picky with feedback, about embracing authenticity, even when it's hard of one. Anything else from Alex's journey that stands out to you?
One thing that stuck with me is how the episode acknowledges the role of luck. Yes, Alex worked hard and honed their craft, but they were also just lucky to be in the right place at the right time when Miss Harper walked into the room.
Fortune favors the bold and all that.
Right. But it's not just about being bold. It's also about being prepared, being open to the unexpected, and recognizing when luck comes knocking.
And sometimes luck comes disguised as something else. You know, a rejection, a setback, a detour. But those experiences can lead to something amazing.
It's not about chasing luck. It's about putting yourself out there, being open to new experiences, and trusting that things will work out even if you can't see how right now.
Trust the process.
Exactly. Sometimes we get so caught up in the how and the striving and trying to control everything that we forget to just let go.
And trust that the journey is just as important as the destination, maybe even more important.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
It's in those detours, those unexpected encounters, those serendipitous moments that we often discover who we really are.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what are your biggest takeaways so far? What's really resonating with you?
For me, it's the way all these themes connect. The importance of doing the inner work alongside the outer hustle. Finding that balance between seeking feedback and trusting your gut. The reminder that even in a city of millions, your unique voice matters. It's like Alex's story is a reflection of so many creative journeys, and I think we can all learn something from it.
You know, it's funny how much we can get out of a story, even when it's made up. Alex's journey, as we've been talking about, it's almost like a guidebook for navigating not just the creative world, but really any field where you're putting yourself out there, going for something big.
What I find fascinating is how much the episode emphasizes this idea of duality. The city itself, it's exciting, but it's also overwhelming. Success brings opportunities, but also pressure, and even feedback can be helpful, but it can also throw you off track if you're not careful.
It's like Alex is constantly trying to find that balance point, right, between these opposing forces. And I think a lot of people listening can relate to that, especially nowadays when we're just bombarded with information, expectations, and opportunities. So how do you stay true to yourself with all that noise going on around you?
I think self-awareness is key. You have to know your strengths, your weaknesses, what you value, what inspires you, and what helps you stay grounded.
Yeah. Because if you don't know yourself, how can you possibly make the right choices right? How do you know which path to take? Whose advice to listen to, or even recognize the opportunities that are actually good for you?
Exactly. And it's not like you figure it out once and you're done.
No.
It's this constant process of checking in with yourself, reflecting on your experiences, and being willing to change direction when you need to. It's like having that internal compass that guides you through all the ups and downs of life.
And I think that's where Alex's connection to their hometown, to Milltown, becomes so important. It's like that place represents their foundation, their values, who they are at their core. And even though they're physically far away, they keep going back to it for inspiration to stay grounded.
It's a good reminder that we all need those anchors, those places or practices or people that help us stay connected to ourselves, especially when we're pushing beyond our comfort zones.
It makes you wonder, Ray, if maybe part of the reason Alex's story resonates so much with Mrs. Harper, the publisher, is because it taps into that desire for authenticity, for something real and raw and unfiltered.
It's like in this world where everything's so polished and perfect, we crave those genuine human moments. We want to connect with stories that feel true, that remind us that we're not alone in our struggles and our successes.
And maybe that's the big takeaway here. It's not about being perfect or trying to fit into some mold of what success is supposed to look like. It's about owning your imperfections, your unique story, your messy, beautiful humanness.
Absolutely. And having the courage to share those stories with the world, even if they're quiet, even if they don't fit into a neat little box.
Because there's someone out there like Miss Harper who's waiting to be moved, inspired, reminded of the power of a story that comes from the heart.
And you know what? Maybe that Miss Harper is you. Maybe you have a story you've been holding back, afraid to share. And that story is the one that could connect with people toward the movement, or simply touch someone's heart in ways you can't even imagine.
So as we wrap up this episode, I'll leave you with this question. What's your Milltown? What stories are you carrying inside? And what would it take for you to step onto that stage to share your voice with the world, to truly believe in the power of your unique perspective?
Your story matters, and people want to hear it. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.